ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 28. Puranjan becomes a woman in the next life. So we are at text 42. Yes. Pare Brahmani Chatmanam Param Brahmani Tathatmani Ikshmano Vihayiksham Asmat Uparamaha. Translation.
King Maladhwaja could thus observe that the supersoul was sitting by his side, and that he, as the individual soul, was sitting by the side of the supersoul. Since both were together, there was no need for separate interest. Thus, he ceased from such activities. Purport: in the advanced stage of devotional service, the devotee does not see anything separate between his own interest and those of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Both interests become one, for the devotee does not act for a separate interest. Whatever he does in the interest of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At that time, he sees everything in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything. Having attained this stage of understanding, he sees no distinction between the spiritual and material worlds. In perfect vision, the material world becomes the spiritual world due to its being the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Lord, of the Godhead. For the perfect devotee, the energy and the energetic are non-different. Thus, the so-called material world becomes spiritual. Sarvam khalva idam brahma. Everything is intended for the service of the Supreme Lord, and the expert devotee can utilize any so called material thing for the Lord's service. One cannot serve the Lord without being situated on the spiritual platform. Thus, if a so called material thing is dotted in the service of the Lord, it is no longer to be considered material. Thus, the pure devotee in his perfect vision sees from all angles. Hare Krishna.
Now King Malayadhvaj could observe the super soul sitting by his side. Right. And thus he realized that there is no separate endeavor required as both were together. And thus he ceased from the material activities. Right. Ceased from such activities which are in separate with the interest of the Supreme Lord. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains the advanced stage of devotional service, devotee does not see anything as his own interest. The interest of the devotee matches with the interest of the Supreme Lord. And thus there is no separate endeavor is required. See, one of the reasons why the living entity is in the material world is ichcha, dvesha. So, because he has a separate ichcha apart from the Supreme Lord, then what happens is, the one tries to come to the material world, one comes to the material world and tries to enjoy the material world. But in the perfect vision, he will see his interest in sync with the interest of the Supreme. And that is the perfect vision. And thus what happens is the material world Prabhupada says the so-called material world will convert into the spiritual world. And this is the real meaning of Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma, that everything is Brahma because there is no separate interest. Right. Now it is the expertise of a devotee to convert material element into spiritual element. And Srila Prabhupada was the champion of this. Right. He converted literally wherever he went, he converted the material realm into the spiritual world by his own presence and by the principle of connecting it with Supreme Yukta Vairagya. Text 43. पतिं परमधर्मज्ञं वैदर्भीमलयध्वजं प्रेम्णा पर्यचथित्वा भोगान् सा पतिदेवता. Translation.
Translation: The daughter of King Vidarbha accepted her husband all in all as the supreme. She gave up all sensual enjoyment and in complete renunciation followed the principles of her husband who was so advanced. Thus, she remained engaged in his service. Purport: Figuratively, King Malayadhwaja is the spiritual master and his wife Vaidarbhi is the disciple. The disciple accepts the spiritual master as the supreme personality of Godhead. As stated by Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur in Guru Ashtaka, Sakshat Dharitvena, one directly accepts the Guru, the spiritual master, as the supreme personality of Godhead. One should accept the spiritual master not in the sense that the Mayavadi philosophers do, but in the way recommended here. Since the spiritual master is the most confidential servant of the Lord, he should be treated exactly like the supreme personality of Godhead. The spiritual master should never be neglected or disobeyed like an ordinary person. If a woman is fortunate enough to be the wife of a pure devotee, she can serve her husband without any desire for sense gratification. If she remains engaged in the service of her exalted husband, she will automatically attain the spiritual perfections of her husband. If a disciple gets a bona fide spiritual master, simply by satisfying him, he can attain a similar opportunity to serve the Supreme Personality of God. Hare Krishna.
Now Vaidarbhi here, who is the wife of Malayadhwaja, she accepted her husband to be all in all Bhogansa Pati Devata. Right. And she was engaged and fully engaged in the service, and thus eventually she is going to have the same destination by the service as Malayadhwaj attained by tapasya and his devotional service. Right. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, King Malayadhwaja is the spiritual master figuratively, and Vaidarbhi is the disciple. And the disciple should accept spiritual master as all in all. It is like Sakshad Haritvena Samasta Shastri. Now, the Sakshat Hari is not like the Mayavadi understanding that my Guru is God and he has become God and I am doing sadhana so that I will become next God. So I will remove the photo of my Guru and I will put my photo there. And my disciple, no, that is not the understanding. Here, the understanding is my Guru is one with God because he has no separate interest. 10 times in Bhagavad Gita, we have seen that the soul will never merge. In fact, in the universe, nothing merges with anything else. Even the river water goes to the ocean, the river doesn't merge with the ocean. Okay, every water molecule maintains its separate identity. And we have seen many examples that how it is like the green bird entering the green tree. Looks like the bird has merged with the tree from a distance, but the tree remains and the bird remains, and the separate reciprocation of the tree also continues. So the Mayavadi understanding that Guru is God is a very, very preliminary and quite naive understanding. But that is not the oneness we are talking about. Spiritual master is Kintu Prabhurya Priya Eva Tasya, is the most confidential servant of the Lord, and therefore he should be treated exactly like the Supreme Lord. Right. And therefore the spiritual master should never be neglected or disobeyed. This is very, very important. Right. So now the spiritual master may do tremendous austerity and tremendous efforts, and one simply by serving such a personality will attain the same similar fruits. Now you tell me what is easy to do huge tapasya or to serve someone who is a tapasvi. Okay. And serving someone who is a tapasvi is far easier than doing the huge kind of tapasya. And especially generally when the tapasvis they do tapasya, it is very difficult to please them. But the Vaishnava tapasvis, like the spiritual master and about the senior devotees, it is quite easy to please them. And therefore, one will attain the same result as one is attained by one spiritual master in the service of the spiritual master. And therefore, Prabhupada writes, and this is true with the husband and wife in this case of Malay Dwaj and Vaidarvi. If a disciple gets a bona fide spiritual master, simply by satisfying him, he can attain the similar opportunities to serve the Supreme. Right? So this is the power of Guru Nishtha, but not in the Mayavadi sense of Guru Nishtha, that my Guru is God, and that is not the understanding. Text 44. Chiravasa Vrdakshama Venubhut Shiroruha Bhavavupapatim Shanta Shikha Shantam Ivanalam. Translation.
The daughter of King Vidarbha wore old garments, and she was lean and thin because of her vows of austerity. Since she did not arrange her hair, it became entangled and twisted in locks. Although she remained always near her husband, she was as silent and unagitated as the flame of an undisturbed fire. Purport: when one begins to burn firewood, there is smoke and agitation in the beginning. Although there are so many disturbances in the beginning, once the fire is completely set, the firewood burns steadily. Similarly, when both husband and wife follow the regulatory principles of austerity, they remain silent and are not agitated by sensual impulses. At such a time, both husband and wife are benefited spiritually. One can attain this stage of life by completely giving up a luxurious mode of life. In this verse, the word Chiravasa refers to very old torn garments. The wife, especially, should remain austere, not desiring luxurious dresses and living standards. She should accept only the bare necessities of life and minimize her eating and sleeping. There should be no question of mating. Simply by engaging in the service of her exalted husband, who must be of pure duty, the wife will never be agitated by sensual impulses. The Vanaprastha stage is exactly like this. Although the wife remains with the husband, she undergoes severe austerities and penances so that although both husband and wife live together, there is no question of sensual gratification. In this way, both husband and wife can live together perpetually. Since the wife is weaker than the husband, this weakness is expressed in the verse with the words upapatim. Upa means near to or almost equal to. Being a man, the husband is generally more advanced than his wife. Nonetheless, the wife is expected to give up all luxurious habits. She should not even dress nicely or comb her hair. Hair combing is one of the main business of women. In the Vanaprastha stage, the wife should not take care of her hair. Thus, her hair will become tangled in knots. Consequently, the wife will no longer be attractive to the husband, and she herself will no longer be agitated by sensual impulses. In this way, both husband and wife can advance in spiritual consciousness. This advanced stage is called the Paramhansa stage, and once it is obtained, both husband and wife can be actually liberated from bodily consciousness. If the disciple remains steady in the service of the spiritual master, he need no longer fear falling down into the clutches of Maya.
Yeah. Chiravasa Vratakshama. So Vaidarvi, she was wearing the old garments. She became very lean and thin because of the vows of Vratakshama, because of vows of very severe austerities. She did not arrange her hairs and they entangled and twisted in locks. Right. Venubhut Shiroruha. Bhavavu Upapatim Shantam. And she always remained near her husband, and she was as silent and unagitated as the flame of undisturbed fire. Okay. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains this is the condition of one who is completely dedicated to service of one's spiritual master. Right. And the entire purport has to be taken in context, where it is explained that the Vanaprastha life, leading a Vanaprastha life, where one is completely dedicated to one's spiritual master. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that when one begins to burn firewood, there is a smoke and agitation in the beginning, and there will be so many disturbances. But when the fire is completely set, the fire will burn very steadily. That we have seen, chula, when you want to do some cooking on the chula, in Govardhan Yatra, we do cooking on the chula. Initially it may be a lot of disturbance, there will be smoke, फूंकनी लेके हम फूकते रहेंगे उसको. But when the fire starts burning steadily, then there will be no more smoke or agitation. Similarly, when the husband and wife, when they follow the principles of austerity, they will remain steady and will not be disturbed by so many desires. Again, we have to understand the context. Here, Narada Muni is describing the story of Vaidarbhi and Malayadhvaj, two Prachina Barhishat, who is extremely attached to his family, and even after extreme old age, is not giving up the family. And here also, the figuratively, even Malayadhvaj, he has completed his entire Grihastha life and he has entered Vanaprasthashram. Okay, so this at this point of time is the discussion is going on. And then here the point here is that absorption in the spiritual activity and making the best use of whatever remaining year one has at one's command to be fully spiritually engaged. And it has to be done with the lesser bodily absorption and more absorption in the spiritual activities. And it is easy when husband and wife both are devotees. But if husband and wife, one of them is on a different level of understanding of Krishna consciousness, then it needs a very, very skillful execution. It is not that we cannot disturb a family and have an undisturbed spiritual life. That is not possible. Right? You cannot disturb one institution and build another. So one has to be very careful in such a situation that our spiritual activities are not agitating, the other people in the house. We had a very wonderful devotee. Was it Krishna Prabhu? What was his name? Our, very old devotee recently passed away. So at the age of 85, he passed away. He used to come to Satyavati Mataji's program, Jaidev Prabhu and Satyavati Mataji's program. And this devotee, he was the only person who was a devotee in his house. And the others were not devotees. They were loving, but they were absolutely not favorable. They had big, big dogs in the house and, eating meat also in the house and like that. But a very good family. I mean, apart from these things, the TV was always blaring, always there was a blaring sound in the house. But this devotee, throughout his life, he remained in the house. And then later he practiced his devotional service, as a grahastha, and later when things were not so much dependent on him, when the next generation take charge, he used to come to Kunja Bihari temple. He used to get up every day at 2 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock. He will reach Kunja Bihari. He will do deity worship, deity serving, literally, 5 days a week, and remain in the temple, hear Bhagavatam class and everything else. And wife and others were not interested. They said that, see, we are not disturbing you. You also don't disturb us. And then pension is there. You just keep giving us pension. And, TTMM was. Tera tu mera mein. Okay. But he performed very wonderful devotional service. Although things were very, very unfavorable in his house. They used to cook for him, on a separate, some 3 4 pots kind of a thing. Again, a good family. It is not that, but simply habitually the family was something like. So it needs a real determination to not to throw tantrums on the situation, and this is called as vratakshama. That vratakshama means vrata one has taken that it will. So this is how Vaidarbhi served Malayadhvaj, and this is how one should serve one's spiritual master. Again, it has to be very age appropriate and according to Desha, Kala and Patra. If a disciple remains steady in the service of the spiritual master, he no longer fear falling down in the clutches of Maya. Right. So this is the power of serving the spiritual master in the parampara. Text 45. अजानति प्रियतमं यदो उपरमतम् अंगना सुस्थिरमासनमासाद्य यथा पूर्वम् उपाचरत्. Translation.
The daughter of King Vidarbha continued as usual to serve her husband, who was seated in a steady posture, until she could ascertain that he had passed away from the body. But it appears that the queen did not even talk to her husband while serving. She would simply perform her prescribed duties without talk. Thus, she did not stop rendering service until she could ascertain that her husband had passed from the body. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So one fine day, right, the eventual thing happened, and that is Malayadhvaj, while being deeply absorbed in the spiritual activities, he passed away. And now we are having the two, the repeat instances here. We have also seen that how Maharaj Prithu, similarly, while performing the austerity, he left his body. And then Maharani Archi, I hope we all remember those beautiful pastimes that we just read. She was also serving equally well. And here is the same thing with King Vidarbha and King Malayadhvaj and Vaidarbhi. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the queen, Vaidarbhi, was so deeply absorbed in serving, she did not speak too much. She simply used to perform her prescribed duties without a talk. Right. So, and then one fine day she realized that, the things have happened otherwise. Text 46. यदा नोपलभे तङ्घौ उष्माणां पत्युमर्चति आसीत् संविघ्नहृदया यूथभ्रष्टा मृगी यथा. Translation.
While she was serving her husband by massaging his legs, she could feel that his feet were no longer warm and could thus understand that he had already passed from the body. She felt great anxiety upon being left alone. Bereft of her husband's company, she felt exactly as the deer feels upon being separated from its mate. Purport. As soon as the circulation of blood and air within the body stops, it is to be understood that the soul within the body has left. The stoppage of the blood circulation is pursued when the hands and the feet lose heat. When one tests whether a body is alive or not by feeling the heart's palpitations and the coldness of the feet and hands. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So while Vaidarbhi was serving her husband, she realized that there are no more life symptoms. And she just felt Yuta Brashta Mrugi Yatha. She felt as if, the beautiful analogy here is bereft of her husband's company, she felt exactly as the deer feels upon being separated from its mate. So whenever Bhagavatam gives the analogy, they are very, very specific. And this is, the deer feeling, one can see that comes in Mahabharata. When Maharaj Pandu, he just struck an arrow to one of the deer while they were in their Shringaras, the deer was dead. And then similarly, Ramayana also begins with this also. Hamsa, there is a Hamsa couple, and this hunter hitting the male Hamsa, and this another Hamsa, Krauncha Hamsa, is feeling the same pangs of separation. So this is the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the purport Srila Prabhupada describes that it is the heart dead which is accepted in the Shastra. And it's not just the brain dead. Okay. As long as the heart is palpitating and then there is circulation of body and air, till that time the person is considered to be alive. But when the heart palpitations stop and there is a coldness of feet and hands, then it is considered as death. Text 47. आत्मानं सोचते दीनम् अबन्धुं विक्लवाश्रुभिः स्तनौ आसिच्य विपने सुस्वरं प्ररोदसा. Translation.
Being now alone and a widow in that forest, the daughter of Vidarbha began to lament, incessantly shedding tears which soaked her breast and crying very loudly. Purport. Figuratively, the queen is supposed to be the disciple of the king. Thus, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciple should cry exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and spiritual master are never separated because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called the association of Vani words. Physical presence is called Vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master.
Yeah. So, prarurodha, she began to wildly lament, realizing that she is Atmanam Suchitim Bandhum, Dinam Bandhum, Viklava. So, Viklava means her heart was broken and she began to lament, incessantly shedding tears, and thus she began to cry very loudly. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that figuratively, here the disciple, is being ex- expressed that how he should express upon the departure of one's spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada had to teach all these things because he was planting an entire new culture. Sometimes people just, say, no, it is the soul, and should we cry or not? So Prabhupada said as soon as once the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, the disciple should cry exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves the body. Okay. This needs to be told because one thing is Kali Yuga is such that nowadays emotions are not there much in the people in general. People have become quite emotionless. Maybe because of watching too many emotions on the screen. One's quota of the emotion is only getting over nowadays. And another thing is, especially for a devotee, they should not complicate their life thinking that, oh, is the soul and, the pure soul has gone back to the spiritual world. Why a devotee cries at the departure of another devotee is because, that wonderful association, that access to Krishna's mercy is now completely lost. Right. And therefore, there is an entire Vilapa Geet, right, which is written by Narottam Das Thakur. Jiyanilo Premadhana, Karuna Prachur, Heno Prabhu Kotha Gela, Acharya Thakur. Right. So, as long as spiritual, and Prabhupada writes a very beautiful point here. However, even after a departure, a disciple and spiritual master are never separated. The spiritual master will always keep the company of the disciple. The most important word here is as long as the disciple follows the instructions of the spiritual master. So the word as long as is very important and scary also, right? So we have to associate with spiritual master by following the words of spiritual master, and also we have to ensure that we also assist others to follow the words of the spiritual master. Text 48. Uttishtottishta Rajarasher. I think we will not. We'll just read the translation. Imam Udathi Mekhalam Dasyubhya Kshatrabandhubhya Bibhyaktim Patumarhase. Translation.
O best
Translation.
of kings.
Yes, go ahead, Prabhuji.
Thank you. O best of kings, please get up. Get up. Just see the world surrounded by water and infested with rogues and so-called kings. This world is very much afraid, and it is your duty to protect her. Purport. When an Acharya comes following the superior orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his representative, he establishes the principles of religion as enunciated in Bhagavad Gita. Religion means abiding by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Religious principles begin from the time one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the Acharya's duty to spread a bona fide religious system and induce everyone to bow down before the Supreme Lord. One executes the religious principles by rendering devotional service, specifically the 9 items like hearing, chanting, and remembering. Unfortunately, when the Acharya disappears, rogues and non-devotees take advantage and immediately begin to introduce unauthorized principles in the name of so-called swamis, yogis, philanthropists, welfare workers, and so on. Actually, human life is meant for executing the orders of the Supreme Lord. And this is stated in Bhagavad Gita 9.34. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyajimam namaskuru mamaivaishasi yuktaivam atmanam mat parayanaha. Engage your mind always in thinking of me and become my devotee. Offer obeisances and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. The main business of human society is to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead at all times and to become his devotees, to worship the Supreme Lord and to bow down before him. The Acharya, the authorized representative of the Supreme Lord, establishes these principles, but when he disappears, things once again become disordered. The perfect disciples of the Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. At the present moment, practically the entire world is afraid of rogues and non-devotees. Therefore, this Krishna conscious movement is started to save the world from irreligious principles. Everyone should cooperate with this movement in order to bring about actual peace and happiness in the world. Thank you, Prabhu.
Uttishta Uddishta Rajarshi. So she said that, my dear great king, oh best of the king, please wake up, get up, get up. The world is filled with water and the rogues and thieves in the name of the kings. The world is very much afraid, and it is your duty to protect this world. And the Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada explains that whenever Acharya comes following the instructions of the superior order, what happens is he established the principles of religion. So this is the literal meaning of the word Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale. Krishna Pristhaya means one is very dear to Krishna, and Krishna Pristhaya also means he is sent by Krishna. Okay, so Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale. So Krishna Pristhaya. So he is the, and what he will do? He will establish the religion. What is the religion? Dharmam tu sakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. So he will establish the religion, and in the Kali Yuga, and of course in all the ages, but especially in Kali Yuga, the greatest religion is Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Adhokshashe. He will establish the principles of Bhakti Yoga, especially Navavidha Bhakti, and most importantly, hearing, chanting, and remembering Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. But when the Acharya disappears, the rogues and the non-devotees will take the advantage and introduce some unscrupulous principles in the name of so-called religion, right? And we need such a bold stance by Srila Prabhupada. That Prabhupada writes, there will be so many. Of course, ISKCON is famous for the philanthropic activity, but the core of ISKCON is International Society for Krishna Consciousness, right? We perform the philanthropic activity, keeping the sambandha with Krishna very intact. And this is the goal of the human form of life. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. The main business of the human form of life, now see, I have not heard so emphatically anybody describing like this. Such conviction. The main business of human form of life is manmana. One should think of the Supreme. Bhava mad bhakto, become his devotee. Madhyaji mam namaskuru. Worship him and bow down before the Supreme Lord. And the Acharya will establish this principle, but when he disappears, things may again go disarray, and therefore the perfect disciple should follow this perfect instruction of the spiritual master. And then there will be actual peace and happiness in the world. So we are not against the philanthropy activity. ISKCON is famous for billions of plates of prasadam being distributed. At the same time, in the name of philanthropy only, one should not lose track of Krishna consciousness, the Sambandha Gyan. Otherwise, you will end up becoming a mission, distributing some non-vegetarian, the sannyasis is distributing the non-vegetarian food in the name of serving Daridra Narayan, killing one living entity to serve another, right? So this is how Srila Prabhupada very beautifully summarizes the things here. We will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.